The Christmasaurus by Tom Fletcher, Chapter 12, A Stuffed Dinosaur. The post is here, get off your bottom, it's that time of year. Wipe out the sleep, pop on your specs, give the nice ones a tick and the rotters an X. Thank you very much, Snozzletrump, called Santa, as he slipped his extra-large bottom into his squishy letter-reading chair for another day of letter-reading. Things were getting rather busy in the North Pole, and so they should. It was December, after all. Letters were flying in from around the world, and the very old, very crooked Christmas tree was sprouting out magic bean pods left, right and centre, up and down, and every which way you can imagine. The farmer elves were sowing their snowfields daily, and the mining elves had started their first round digging for toys. The consumption of half crumpets had doubled in the last week alone, and was showing no signs of slowing, as you can see from this handy crumpet consumption graph. The Christmasaurus was spending most of his time watching the magnificently magical flying reindeer on their nightly practice flights around the North Pole airspace. He stared at them and daydreamed wonderful flying dreams in his little dinosaur brain, whilst the rest of the North Pole was busy preparing Christmas. There was one thing, though, that was about to put a cracker in the works. That thing was a letter, and that letter was from William Trundle. Santa opened the letter, which was on the top of the towering pile that Snozzletrump had just plopped onto his desk, and read it aloud as he always did. Dear Santa, for Christmas this year I would like a lot of things that you probably can't give me, but a dinosaur would make me very happy. Merry Christmas, William Trundle. There was no response at all from the ancient old Christmas tree. Santa frowned and read the letter aloud a second time and then a third. He scratched his beard and tried again. But no matter how many times he read the letter, the old Christmas tree never sprouted any bean pods at all. Maybe it's because the letter was so vague. What sort of dinosaur does this young William Trundle want? A real one? Impossible. No child would ask for that. A toy dinosaur, then. A stuffed dinosaur. A remote-control robo-dinosaur. The possibilities are endless. What do you make of this, Snozzletrump? Asked Santa as he took a sip from a cup of warm melted candy cane juice. Snozzletrump had heard Santa read the letter over and over again. Sounds like this kid's down in the dumps. That's the opinion of Snozzletrump. Santa screwed his face up at such an awful piece of elf poetry, which was definitely not up to Snozzletrump's usual standard. He sighed, held the letter in his large, flubby hands, and took in a deep, calming breath through his white beard. His sky-coloured eyes closed and rolled back in his head, and after a few seconds he knew everything there was to know about William Trundle. This was another one of Santa's special powers. Suddenly his brain was full of William's life. He now knew about William's family, about William's accident when he was little, his wheelchair, his love of dinosaurs, and just how rotten life had been lately. Oh dear, this is a tough one, said Santa. This boy needs something really special this year. At that moment Santa stood up, and in one massive swoosh of his jolly fat arms he cleared everything away from the giant messy workstation in his room. Sprout, Spudcheeks, he called, and the two elves seemed to pop into existence from out of nowhere, right at Santa's side, their mouths full of buttery crumpet halves. What took you so long? Fetch me my tools, please. I'm going to make this one myself, said Santa very seriously. The looks on the elves' faces were of disbelief and pure delight. Hooray! They cried in harmony. It wasn't very often that Santa handmade a present for someone. It happened only very occasionally, or in exceptional circumstances, but when he did, those presents were always far more beautiful and special than any present that the elves dug up from the ice. He once made a rocking horse for the Queen of England when she was a little girl, which he enchanted so that it came to life every Thursday night. Another Christmas, he handmade a toy racing car for the Prince of Peru, who was a very naughty prince, almost on the naughty list every year. But instead of putting him on the naughty list and forgetting about him, Santa enchanted the racing car so that it got smaller and smaller each time the young prince misbehaved. If he didn't stop being so naughty, it would eventually disappear completely, and so the naughty prince stopped being naughty. Santa was very clever like that. The two elves sprinted out of the room, and a few seconds later reappeared at Santa's doorway, carrying a huge tool chest on their backs. It was overflow with springs and cogs, bits and bobs, thingamabobs, and all sorts of gadgets that only Santa knew how to use. Now go and tell the Christmasaurus that I need him at once, please. Hot to it, elves. We don't have all day, said Santa, eager to get started. Yes, sir, right away, we're heading out the door. We haven't got all day to fetch that festive dinosaur, chirped the elves as they danced out of the room to fetch the Christmasaurus. Moments later, they came riding in on the back of the Christmasaurus. The elves loved to ride on the Christmasaurus's back, whose tongue was flapping happily out of his mouth, eager to find out why Santa needed him so urgently. "My dear Christmasaurus, we have a job to do, and we have to do it right," Santa said importantly. "I need you to stand here for me and be very still, because I am going to make a toy dinosaur and I'm going to make it look like you." The Christmasaurus's eyes widened in wonder at the thought of seeing Santa make a dinosaur. He'd never seen Santa make anything before. He climbed up onto one of Santa's worktops, put his big dinosaur chin in the air, straightened his back, and extended his long snowflake-patterned tail, trying to look like the perfect dinosaur model. "First, I'll need my extra magnifying super zoom or toy-matic ogle goggles," Santa said, as he strapped on some brass goggles onto his head. The watching elves giggled as the goggles made Santa's eyes look like two giant baubles. "Gloves!" he cried. Sprout and Spud Cheeks quickly slipped 2 heavy leather gloves onto Santa's hands, and he started sifting through his tool chest. He had every toy-making contraption that had ever existed, and a few that didn't exist too. Long stuffing sticks for stuffing things, bendy-wendy things for bendy-wending things, happy-flappy things for making happy-flappy things. You name it, Santa had it, and if you can't name it, he probably had that too. And so, as the December snow fell heavily at the windows, Santa got to work. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was the hardest thing Santa had ever made. He worked all through the night until Starlump and Specklehump brought him breakfast, pancakes with a side of waffles, Santa's favourite. Then he carried on working some more. All the elves crowded round to watch the master at work as the Christmas dinosaur stood as still as a statue in the warm glow from the fire. Santa chiselled and sawed, chopped and sewed, and didn't take any breaks. He only managed to stay awake by repeatedly drinking venti-sized coffees from the North Starbucks coffee shop with extra toffee nut syrup and a splash of fresh reindeer milk. At last, Santa unstrapped the thick goggles from his head, which left big dark rings around his eyes. "I think we're finished," he said, with a warm, proud smile, and he turned his creation round so that the Christmasaurus and all the elves could get a better look. The crowd of elves gasped in beautiful harmony as they saw the finished toy dinosaur. They thought it was the most amazingly beautiful toy Santa had ever made. And it was. It really was. The Christmasaurus shook out the pins and needles from his legs and hobbled over until he was face to face with Santa's masterpiece. He was nose to nose with the most perfectly detailed toy he had ever set eyes upon. It had soft, leathery skin with incredibly detailed stitching in Santa's own red cotton thread. He'd used 2 large golden buttons for its eyes, and for its stuffing Santa had cut a hole in his own quilted flying coat and poured in half of the wonderfully fluffy double duck feathers. Double duck feathers are the best stuffing feathers for anything, because as soon as you stuff them in, they double, making it double stuffed and double fluffy. Finally, to create the snowflake pattern on its back, Santa wobbled to the window, opened it, and scooped up a handful of real, unmeltable North Pole snow. North Pole snow is one of the most beautiful substances on the planet if you can stop it melting, and Santa can. He gently sprinkled the flakes over the back of the stuffed dinosaur, and as they settled there, the elves applauded in amazement. The stuffed dinosaur was an almost perfect replica of the Christmasaurus. For some of the elves with poor eyesight, it looked as though there were 2 dinosaurs in the room. For the Christmasaurus, this was the closest he'd ever come to looking at another dinosaur. For the first time in his life, he could imagine what it would be like if he weren't on his own, if he weren't so different. He could imagine what it would be like to have a dinosaur friend.